The town of Red Rock was small, almost forgotten by time. It sat on the edge of the Arizona desert, where the wind carried dust across the streets and the sun painted the wooden buildings in shades of orange and brown. The town's population was small too, mostly ranchers, cowboys, and a few shopkeepers who had been born and raised there. Life moved slowly in Red Rock, measured by the rising and setting of the sun, and everyone knew everyone else's business. Strangers were rare, and when they did appear, their presence was always noticed. On this particular afternoon, the town was quiet. The air shimmered with heat, and the faint sound of a distant windmill creaking echoed across the empty streets. Jesse, a cowboy known by nearly everyone in town, was leaning against the wooden railing of the general store porch, taking a moment to rest. He was tall, strong, and rugged, with tanned skin weathered by the sun and years of riding across open plains. His hat shadowed his eyes, but they held a steady, calm gaze that rarely betrayed his thoughts. He was the kind of man who seemed unshakable, someone who had seen storms, cattle stampedes, and bandits without flinching. As Jesse sipped water from a tin cup, his attention was caught by movement at the far edge of the town. A lone figure was approaching from the dusty trail that led into Red Rock. The figure moved slowly, leading a horse that looked tired and worn. Even from a distance, Jesse noticed something unusual about the stranger. She was a young woman, her hair tied back loosely, clothes faded and covered in dust. But what struck him most was her posture. She walked with purpose. Yet there was a delicate strength in the way she held herself. The townspeople began to notice her too. A few shopkeepers stepped outside to watch, whispering to one another. "Who is she?" one asked. "Never seen her before." "She doesn't look like she's from around here," another replied. Curiosity grew, but so did caution. Red Rock had its share of travelers, and not all of them came with good intentions. When the young woman reached the town's main street, she stopped and looked around. Her eyes were clear and steady, scanning the wooden buildings, the dusty road, and finally resting on Jesse. Something in her gaze made him alert. It was quiet but firm, almost commanding attention without a word. She didn't speak at first, just held her horse gently by the reins, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then, in a soft voice that carried just enough for Jesse to hear, she said, "I need help, but I want to do it myself. Please." Her words were simple, almost fragile, yet they carried weight. Jesse felt a strange pull toward her determination. Most people who came into Red Rock asked for guidance, directions, or work. Few had the courage to insist they wanted to handle things on their own, especially while arriving exhausted from a long journey. Jesse's curiosity grew, and he stepped closer, tipping his hat respectfully. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It doesn't look easy. You don't have to do this alone." The young woman shook her head, her expression serious but gentle. "I'll do it myself," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper, yet firm enough that Jesse understood she meant every word. There was no arrogance in her tone, no desire to show off. It was simply resolve, a quiet determination that demanded respect. Jesse studied her for a moment. He had seen many travelers come through Red Rock, some bold, some desperate, but rarely anyone like her. There was something unusual about her presence. Maybe it was the way her eyes reflected experience beyond her years, or perhaps it was the calm confidence that seemed to surround her. Whatever it was, it made him pause and reconsider how he would respond. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll stay close. But if you need help, you just have to say the word." She gave a faint smile, a mix of gratitude and reassurance, and led her horse down the street. Jesse followed at a careful distance, keeping an eye on her and the way she moved. As they walked, the townspeople continued to watch, murmuring among themselves. Some were impressed by her courage. Others were skeptical. In a town where life was predictable, this woman had introduced a ripple of curiosity and intrigue. Children peeked from behind shop windows, and older men leaned on their canes, observing her movements. The horse she led was clearly weary, its legs stiff and its head hanging low. It was obvious the journey had been long and challenging. Yet the young woman did not rush, did not complain. Every step she took seemed measured, careful, and deliberate. They reached the outskirts of Red Rock, where the land became rougher and less maintained. Here, the desert reclaimed some of its space, with prickly bushes, uneven ground, and the occasional abandoned structure. She paused before a dilapidated barn, the kind that looked like it had been standing for decades without care. Its wood was cracked and faded, and the roof sagged under years of neglect. Yet, when she looked at it, her eyes softened. Jessie noticed a flicker of emotion, perhaps memory, perhaps responsibility, but it was clear that this barn meant something to her. She approached the barn carefully, then turned to Jessie. "I'll handle it from here," she said again, her voice calm but resolute. "Please, just let me try." Jessie nodded silently, realizing there was no convincing her otherwise. Her determination was absolute. He watched as she tied her horse to a nearby post, making sure it had water and food, before moving toward the barn entrance. Inside the barn, dust danced in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the broken roof. The smell of old hay mixed with something stronger, perhaps the remnants of neglect. Jessie followed, keeping a respectful distance. Even from the doorway, he could see her small figure moving with care. She began inspecting the space, her hands brushing over objects as if searching for something specific. It was clear she knew exactly what she was doing. Jessie felt a mix of awe and concern. He had faced danger many times, storms, wild animals, and even confrontations with outlaws. But there was a different kind of courage here. This woman faced her challenges quietly, methodically, and alone. Her bravery was not loud or boastful, yet it was undeniable. Hours seemed to pass as she worked. Jessie stayed nearby, watching her every move, noting the careful precision in her actions. She cleaned, organized, and moved objects, all while tending to something he could not yet see clearly. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the barn, and Jessie realized he had been holding his breath without noticing. Finally, she paused and looked up at him. "Thank you for waiting," she said softly. "I couldn't do this without support nearby, even if I handle it myself." Jessie nodded, understanding that support did not always mean direct involvement. Sometimes, it meant presence, trust, and a willingness to stand back while someone else took the lead. As the day ended and the sun set behind the mountains, Jessie realized that this encounter would stay with him. He had seen courage before, but rarely like this. Quiet, determined, and deeply personal. He wondered what life had taught her to give her such strength. And though he would not admit it out loud, he felt a growing respect for the young woman who had arrived quietly, insisted she would do it herself, and had already changed the rhythm of a small town simply by being there. Evening settled over Red Rock, bringing cooler air and the distant sounds of animals returning to their pens. Jessie remained outside the barn, watching the last light fade and reflecting on the unusual day. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew one thing: this woman, quiet and steadfast, had left an impression that would not fade easily. The town had seen many things in its long history, but this combination of resolve, compassion, and determination was something entirely new. And as night fell, the stars began to twinkle above the desert. Jessie knew that tomorrow, and perhaps the days after, would reveal more about the young woman, the barn, and the story she carried with her. But for now, he simply watched, silent and respectful, as she moved inside, taking the first steps of a journey that no one in Red Rock would soon forget. The barn was quiet at first, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls and made every small sound feel louder. Clara moved slowly, her eyes scanning the interior as she stepped over broken boards and loose hay. The smell of dust and old wood filled the air, but it didn't seem to bother her. She had dealt with worse on her journey here. Her hands, calloused from years of work and travel, brushed over the objects in the barn, moving some aside, inspecting others. Every motion was careful and deliberate, as if she was piecing together a puzzle that only she could see. Jessie stayed near the doorway, leaning slightly against the frame. He watched her closely, trying to understand what had brought her here. The townspeople, curious as ever, had begun to gather at the edge of the street again, murmuring quietly to one another. Some had stepped forward, thinking they might offer help, but Jessie had gestured for them to wait. This was her task, her choice, and it seemed only she could handle it. It didn't take long for Jessie to notice the source of her focus. In a far corner of the barn, partially hidden by shadows and broken crates, was a horse. Its coat was matted with dirt, its ribs visible under thin skin, and its legs bore fresh and old wounds. The animal's eyes were wide with fear and pain, and it trembled slightly when Clara approached. The sight of the horse made Jessie's heart tighten. He had seen injured animals before, but there was something about this one that tugged at him. It was as if it carried more than just physical pain. It carried neglect, fear, and loneliness. Clara knelt beside the horse, speaking softly to calm it. "Easy now," she whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze over the animal. "I'm here. I won't hurt you." She ran her hands carefully along its legs, inspecting the injuries. Her fingers moved with precision, checking for broken bones, cleaning dried blood, and soothing the animal with quiet words. Jessie could barely believe the skill she displayed. Even seasoned cowboys could be rough when handling a frightened, injured horse. Yet Clara moved as though she understood every pain the animal felt. Time seemed to stretch as she worked. The sun outside shifted slowly, painting the barn with changing light that highlighted the dust in the air. Jessie remained silent, offering support by simply being present. Occasionally, he would step closer when he saw Clara struggle with a particularly stubborn wound. But she gently waved him back. "I've got this," she said quietly, her determination unwavering. Jessie's mind wandered briefly, wondering about the story behind this young woman. Who was she, and why had she come all this way alone? There was a hint of sadness in her eyes, a depth of experience that could not have been gained from a simple life of travel. Yet, she carried herself with quiet strength, refusing to rely on others even when the work was difficult. The more he watched, the more he realized how unusual it was to encounter someone so young who could face such a challenge without hesitation. The horse, initially terrified and defensive, slowly began to relax under Clara's care. She applied a poultice to its wounds, made from herbs she had carried in a small cloth bag. She spoke to it constantly, as if her words were as important as her hands. Jessie noticed how the animal's breathing became steadier and how it began to trust her presence. It was a small victory, but a significant one. He understood then that her strength was not just physical, it was emotional, a quiet courage that inspired trust and calm even in the most frightened of creatures. Hours passed, and the barn became warmer with the sun's movement. Clara did not tire, her energy fueled by determination and a sense of duty. She worked methodically, ensuring each wound was cleaned and treated properly. She made a bed of fresh hay, coaxing the horse to rest upon it, and checked its hydration, giving it small sips of water from a bucket she had filled earlier. Jessie stayed nearby, admiring her patience and dedication. He had never seen such devotion in action. Most people would have panicked, called for help, or given up entirely. Not Clara. At one point, she paused and looked at Jessie with a faint, tired smile. "It's going to be okay," she said. Not just to him, but to the horse as well. Jessie nodded, though he knew the work was far from over. The horse still had long hours ahead of recovery. But the worst of the immediate danger seemed to have passed. Yet, there was something deeper that Jessie couldn't ignore. He noticed the scars along her hands and forearms, faint lines that told stories of hardship, of labor, and survival. He realized that the strength she displayed now had been built over years of struggle and perseverance. Clara moved with quiet efficiency, never rushing, never hesitating. Each step, each motion, was deliberate. She lifted the horse's leg to clean it, spoke soothing words, and adjusted its position when it flinched. Jessie watched, fascinated by her ability to combine knowledge, skill, and compassion seamlessly. He began to understand that this was more than just an injured animal. It was a test of her endurance, of her patience, and of the bond she could create through trust. The townspeople, who had been watching from a distance, began to whisper in admiration. They had expected a young woman arriving alone to need guidance, but what they saw was something entirely different. Clara's courage was quiet, but undeniable. She had faced a challenge head-on, relying not on others' strength but her own. Some of the older men shook their heads in disbelief, realizing that bravery came in many forms, not all of which involved guns, fists, or physical confrontations. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the barn floor, Clara finished cleaning and bandaging the horse's worst injuries. She stepped back and let out a soft breath, her face glistening with sweat and dust. Jesse, who had been standing silently all day, finally spoke. "You've done a remarkable job," he said, his voice full of respect. "I've seen a lot in my time, but I've never seen anyone handle a situation like this with such care and courage." Clara shook her head gently. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but it needed to be done. I couldn't wait for help. I had to try." Her words carried a mix of humility and quiet pride. She did not seek praise, yet it was impossible not to recognize the magnitude of her effort. Jesse realized that this was the essence of her character: independent, resilient, and compassionate, even in the face of exhaustion and difficulty. The horse, now calmer and more comfortable, nuzzled Clara's shoulder as if in gratitude. Jesse watched this simple gesture and felt a profound sense of respect for her. She had taken on a responsibility that few would dare to face alone, and had handled it with skill and heart. The barn, once a place of neglect and fear, now felt alive with the energy of her dedication and care. Night began to fall, and the sky outside turned a deep shade of indigo, dotted with stars. Clara finally allowed herself a brief moment of rest, sitting beside the horse and gently stroking its mane. Jesse remained at the doorway, observing silently, aware that he had witnessed something extraordinary. He had not just seen her work, he had seen her spirit, her determination, and her unwavering courage. In that moment, he understood why she had insisted on doing it herself. It was not about pride or stubbornness. It was about responsibility, respect for life, and a commitment to face challenges directly. Jesse felt a deep admiration for her, one that went beyond words. She had arrived in Red Rock quietly, yet she had already made an unforgettable impression on everyone who had seen her work. As the night grew darker, Jesse knew that this was only the beginning of her story. The bond she had begun to form with the horse, the trust she had earned, and the courage she had displayed would all play a part in what was to come. For now, he remained silent, giving her space, yet silently promising to be there if she truly needed help. He had learned an important lesson that day. Courage was not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was quiet, steadfast, and gentle, and it could leave even the toughest cowboy in awe. And so, under the first stars of night, Clara rested beside the horse she had tended alone, while Jesse watched outside the barn, reflecting on the remarkable determination of a young woman who had arrived quietly and faced a challenge head-on, proving that strength could be found in patience, care, and unwavering resolve. The first light of morning crept through the broken roof of the barn, painting the dusty interior with streaks of gold. Clara stirred, gently waking the horse she had tended so carefully the day before. The animal's breathing was steadier now, and its body seemed a little stronger, but it still bore the marks of neglect and injury. She whispered softly to it, her voice calm and soothing. "Good morning," she said. "Let's see how we're doing today." Jesse had arrived early, as he had promised, and leaned quietly against the doorway. He had slept little, restless, after witnessing Clara's dedication the day before. Even now, he found it difficult to tear his eyes away. There was something remarkable about her, an inner strength that radiated quietly, yet could not be ignored. Most people, especially young women alone in the desert, would have been exhausted, scared, or frustrated. Clara was none of these. She was focused, determined, and patient. She began her morning routine with careful inspection. Every wound, every bruise, Every strained muscle received attention. She cleaned dried blood and dirt, adjusted the bandages she had applied the previous day, and checked the horse's legs for swelling. Jessie watched her hands, noting the scars along her forearms and fingers. Each mark seemed to tell a story of resilience and endurance, and Jessie couldn't help but wonder what experiences had shaped her into someone capable of this level of care and courage. "Your hands," Jessie said quietly, almost to himself. Clara glanced at him, her expression neutral but thoughtful. "Yes," she admitted. "Life hasn't always been easy. You learn to take care of what matters, even if it's difficult." Her voice was soft, but there was a quiet authority in it. She had faced challenges before, and she knew how to face them again. The horse shifted under her touch, and Clara adjusted its position. Speaking gentle words the animal seemed to understand. She had a natural way of connecting, a patience that few could match. Jessie found himself holding his breath as he watched, sensing the bond forming between them. It was more than just a horse and its caretaker. It was trust earned through effort, kindness, and unwavering focus. As she worked, Jessie finally allowed himself to step closer, curious and cautious. "Do you need me to help with anything?" he asked. Clara shook her head, smiling faintly. "I need you to watch, not to interfere," she said. "Sometimes, this is something I have to do myself." Her words carried a quiet strength, and Jessie realized there was no arguing with her. He nodded, understanding that some battles, some responsibilities, must be faced alone. It was then that he noticed something that made him step back slightly, his stomach tightening with unease. Along her arms, beneath the rolled-up sleeves of her worn shirt, were more scars than he had first noticed. Faint lines, some old and faded, others redder and more recent, marked her skin in patterns that spoke of repeated challenges, of past struggles and survival. Each scar seemed to carry a story of its own, a testament to hardships she had endured. Jessie felt a mix of shock and admiration. This young woman, who appeared so delicate, had faced dangers and difficulties that he could barely imagine. Clara seemed aware of his gaze but didn't speak of it. She focused on the horse, continuing her careful work. As the morning passed, she fed the animal small portions of water and oats, encouraging it to eat despite its weakness. She cleaned and bandaged the remaining injuries, applying a herbal mixture she had prepared herself. Every motion was meticulous, every step measured. Jessie found himself amazed at her skill, and at the calm determination she displayed in the face of what would have been overwhelming to most. Finally, she stepped back and took a long breath. "It's ready," she said quietly. "You should see it for yourself." Jessie hesitated, unsure of what she meant. He followed her slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile trust she had built with the horse. As he approached, he saw the horse clearly for the first time. Its coat, though still dirty and rough, had a sheen of life returning. Its eyes, once wide with fear, were now softer, more trusting. Jessie's gaze then shifted to the wounds. He saw the depth of the cuts, the bruises, the twisted leg that had caused the animal immense pain. It was worse than he had imagined. For a moment, Jessie felt his stomach tighten. The sight of the injuries, combined with the knowledge that Clara had handled them almost entirely on her own, left him pale. He had faced dangerous situations, accidents, and emergencies before, but this was something different. It was the kind of courage that did not involve guns or fists, yet it was every bit as powerful. Clara had stared at the challenge, acknowledged the risks, and faced them alone. She had turned despair into hope, with nothing but her hands, her knowledge, and her heart. Jessie felt a rush of admiration and something else, respect so deep it left him silent. He realized that this young woman had endured much more than he had ever known, and that the quiet strength she displayed now was born from experience and resilience. He thought about the journey she must have taken to reach this barn, the hardships she must have faced, and the determination it took to arrive at this point. Clara knelt beside the horse again, smoothing its mane and whispering words of encouragement. Jessie stayed still, observing. He knew he could never understand everything she had faced, yet he could witness her courage in action. There was no fear in her movements, no hesitation, only careful, deliberate effort guided by compassion. Even in the face of exhaustion, she continued, her focus unwavering. The morning passed slowly, the sun climbing higher and filling the barn with light. Jesse noticed how the townspeople, who had gathered outside to watch, were silent, their usual chatter replaced with awe. They had expected a young woman arriving alone to struggle, perhaps fail, but what they saw instead was determination and skill beyond what they had imagined. She had earned their respect without words, simply through action. As Clara adjusted the horse's position, Jesse finally spoke, his voice low but filled with admiration. "I've seen a lot of things," he said. "Storms, stampedes, injuries, but I've never seen anyone face a situation like this with such care and strength." Clara looked up at him, her eyes calm. "It's not about strength in the way you think," she said softly. "It's about patience, attention, and doing what's right, even when it's hard." Jesse nodded slowly, realizing she was right. Courage came in many forms, and hers was quiet, steadfast, and deeply humane. She had faced a challenge most would avoid, and had done so alone, relying on skill, knowledge, and determination. He felt humbled, and a little pale, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding what it took to accomplish what she had. By mid-morning, the horse was standing more comfortably. Its breathing was steady, its legs less strained, and it seemed to sense the safety and care that Clara offered. She gave it gentle pats, speaking softly as she checked every bandage one last time. Jesse watched, struck by the bond that had formed between them. It was clear that the horse trusted her completely, and that trust had been earned through patience and courage. Clara finally stood, brushing dust from her hands. "It's going to be okay," she said, both to Jesse and the horse. "I can't promise everything will be perfect right away, but we've made a start." Jesse nodded, understanding the weight of her words. She had faced a challenge head-on and emerged victorious, but she knew recovery would take time. Her humility and awareness of responsibility only added to the respect he felt. For Jesse, the moment was unforgettable. He had seen bravery before, but never like this. It was not loud, not boastful, and not aggressive. It was quiet, steady, and full of heart. He realized that Clara had endured hardships beyond what most could imagine, and that her courage now was a reflection of years of perseverance, patience, and inner strength. The sun climbed higher, and Clara guided the horse to a patch of sunlight where it could rest and warm itself. Jesse remained at the barn entrance, watching quietly, aware that he had witnessed something extraordinary. Clara had arrived as a stranger, faced a challenge alone, and emerged victorious through determination and compassion. Her strength left even him pale. Not from fear, but from the realization of what she had achieved. And in that moment, Jesse understood that courage came in many forms. Sometimes it was loud and fierce, sometimes it was quiet and unwavering. Clara had shown him the latter, and he knew it was a lesson he would never forget. The barn, once silent and dusty, now held a sense of hope and renewal, a testament to the power of determination, care, and the quiet strength of one remarkable young woman. The sun was high in the sky when Clara finally allowed herself a brief moment to rest. The horse she had cared for, though still weak, stood with more confidence, its breathing steady and its gaze calmer. Clara leaned against a wooden post inside the barn, wiping the sweat from her brow, her body aching from the long hours of work. She felt the exhaustion deep in her bones, but it was mixed with a quiet satisfaction. She had faced the challenge alone, just as she had promised, and she had succeeded. Jesse, who had been watching from the doorway all morning, stepped inside, careful not to startle the horse. "You did an amazing job," he said softly, his voice full of genuine admiration. "I've seen my fair share of tough situations, but nothing like this. You handled it all on your own." Clara shook her head gently. a small smile forming on her lips. "I couldn't have done it perfectly," she admitted, "but it was the right thing to do. That's what matters." Jesse nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. In Red Rock, people were used to challenges. They faced harsh weather, cattle stampedes, and occasional bandits. But what Clara had done went beyond what most could imagine. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty with nothing but her hands, her knowledge, and her heart. There was a quiet bravery in that, one that commanded respect in a way that no story or rumor could. The townspeople, who had gathered outside the barn to watch the progress from a safe distance, now began to approach. Their curiosity mixed with admiration. They had expected to see a young woman struggling or failing, but what they saw instead was success born of determination and skill. Jesse gently introduced Clara to a few of the locals, who offered their congratulations and expressed amazement at what she had accomplished. Clara accepted their kind words with modesty, never letting pride show on her face. One of the older men, a retired rancher named Thomas, spoke up. "I've been around a long time, and I've never seen anyone care for an animal the way you did," he said, his voice full of awe. "You've got courage, skill, and heart, all in one." Clara simply nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I just did what needed to be done," she replied softly. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of someone who had faced far more than the casual observer could ever understand. The horse shifted slightly, nuzzling Clara's shoulder, and she smiled. The bond she had formed with the animal was clear to everyone. It had gone from fear and pain to trust and calm in just a short time, a transformation that spoke volumes about Clara's patience and care. Jesse watched her closely, feeling a growing sense of admiration and respect. He had always believed in action over words, but Clara's actions spoke louder than anything he had ever seen. As the day progressed, Jesse offered to help Clara move the horse to a safer place where it could rest and recover fully. She hesitated at first, true to her independent nature, but finally accepted. Together, they led the horse to a small enclosure with fresh hay and water. The animal seemed to understand that it was safe now, lowering its head and breathing more easily. Jesse couldn't help but smile, impressed by how Clara's quiet determination had changed not only the horse's life but also the mood of the entire town. After ensuring the horse was comfortable, Clara and Jesse returned to the town center. The streets of Red Rock, usually quiet and predictable, felt different now, charged with curiosity and respect for the young woman who had arrived alone and faced an impossible task. People whispered to one another, admiring her courage and resilience. Children peeked from behind fences, their eyes wide with wonder, while the adults shook their heads in disbelief. Clara had earned a place in their hearts, not through words or charm, but through action, patience, and an unwavering sense of responsibility. Jesse and Clara walked slowly through the town, the dust of the streets rising with each step. Jesse finally spoke, his voice quiet but earnest. "You've done something incredible. I can't even begin to imagine what it took to do all of that by yourself." Clara shrugged slightly, her modesty evident. "It was hard, yes, but I had to try. I couldn't leave it to someone else. Not when it mattered so much." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of someone who had faced real challenges and survived. The townspeople continued to watch, some coming closer to offer assistance, others simply observing in awe. Jesse introduced Clara to the mayor, a kind but practical man named Mr. Harris, who extended an invitation for her to stay in town as long as she needed. Clara accepted cautiously, explaining that her goal was never to impose on anyone, but simply to do what was right. Mr. Harris nodded, understanding her position. "You've earned your place here," he said. "By your actions, not your words." As evening approached, Clara found herself standing at the edge of the town, looking out at the vast desert that stretched endlessly beyond the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, the kind of beauty that made the hardships of the day seem both distant and significant at the same time. Jesse stood beside her, silent for a moment, allowing her to take in the view. "You've got a remarkable heart," he said finally. "Not many people have the courage and patience to do what you just did." Clara looked at him and smiled softly. "Sometimes, it's not about being remarkable," she said. "It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." That night, the town of Red Rock slept with a renewed sense of respect and admiration. The story of Clara's determination spread quickly, and even those who had not witnessed it firsthand heard about the young woman who had arrived alone, faced an impossible challenge, and succeeded through patience and skill. Jesse couldn't stop thinking about the day's events. He realized that courage and strength came in many forms, and that Clara had shown him a type of bravery he had rarely seen. Quiet, determined, and deeply humane. Clara stayed in town for several days, tending to the horse and slowly regaining her strength. Each day, she worked quietly, earning the trust and respect of the townspeople. Jesse often helped her, though she rarely asked for assistance, and their mutual respect grew with each passing hour. The horse, now healthier and more confident, followed her every movement, a living testament to her skill and care. One morning, Jesse and Clara walked together to the barn where it all began. The sun was warm, the air fresh with the scent of the desert, and the horse was waiting, eager to see her. Clara approached it slowly, speaking softly and stroking its mane. Jesse watched, amazed at the bond that had formed between them. It was a connection built on trust, patience, and unwavering dedication, a connection that transcended words. As the day drew to a close, Clara finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the journey that had brought her to Red Rock, the challenges she had faced, and the courage she had found within herself. She realized that determination, patience, and compassion were more powerful than she had ever imagined. The horse had recovered because of her, but she had also learned something about her own strength and resilience. Jesse stood nearby, observing her quietly. He had learned something important as well, that true courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and full of heart. Clara had shown him this through her actions, and he knew it was a lesson he would carry with him forever. The cowboy, once unshakable in the face of danger and hardship, had gone pale, not from fear, but from the realization of the quiet strength one person could possess. By nightfall, Clara had completed her work with the horse for the day. She walked back to the center of town, where the townspeople had gathered once again. There were smiles, nods of respect, and a few words of praise, all of which she accepted with humility. She had arrived as a stranger, faced a challenge alone, and left an indelible mark on the town. The people of Red Rock would remember her courage, patience, and quiet determination for years to come. As the stars appeared in the sky, Clara and Jesse stood together outside the barn. The horse rested nearby, calm and comfortable, a living symbol of the day's triumph. Jesse turned to her, his expression serious but kind. "You've done more than just save a horse," he said. "You've shown everyone here what real courage looks like." Clara smiled softly, feeling a sense of peace she had not felt in a long time. "I only did what I had to do," she replied. But deep down, she knew that her actions had mattered far more than she could have imagined. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of desert flowers and distant sagebrush. Clara looked up at the stars, feeling a connection to something larger than herself, a sense of purpose and determination that would guide her in the days to come. Jesse remained silent, respecting her moment of reflection, but he too felt a sense of awe. He had witnessed bravery in a way that words could not describe, and he knew that the story of this young woman, who had arrived quietly and faced her challenges head-on, would stay with him forever. And so, in the quiet of Red Rock, under the vast desert sky, Clara had proven that courage, patience, and determination could overcome even the most difficult challenges. She had earned the respect of a town, healed the wounds of a suffering animal, and discovered a strength within herself that would guide her for the rest of her life. Jesse, the townspeople, and the horse all bore witness to a story of quiet heroism, one that would be told and remembered long after the sun set behind the distant mountains.